Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to let some people stream in, make sure that we are all here for this really awesome conversation. I'm super excited. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for our first Diversity and Inclusion Conversation of 2021. We had our first one in October of 2020, and we're finally able to bring another one to you guys, and we're so thrilled to have that opportunity. This is one part of a series of conversations that Backstage is putting together with different partners around underrepresented groups in the entertainment industry. For this one, obviously, we're focusing on women in leadership, and we're working in partnership with the super awesome women-led talk series in Creative Company. And we're really, really happy to have all of you here, and of course, to have our amazing panel for today. So we're going to kick off with some intros. As you guys can see, we're joined today by our really wonderful ASL interpreter, Jaren Gilchrist. For those who are hearing impaired, so we'll start by stating our names and also what we look like. For those, as we do our name introductions, if you could say them a little slowly so that Jaren can spell them out, because he has to spell them out by hand. So cognizant of that time. My name is Briana Rodriguez. I'm the editor-in-chief here at Backstage. I'm a fair-skinned, curly-haired, hoop-wearing Latina from Queens. Not that that has anything to do with what I look like, but fun tip or fun fact. I'm against a white wall, a backdrop with a few pieces of sort of colorful art frames hanging on the wall behind me. And I will allow our panel to introduce themselves as well. Peggy, if you want to go first.
Hi, everybody. Very happy to be here. My name is Peggy Rajski. I'm 5'2", but you can only see me from the just above chest up. I have a black sweater, a maroon print scarf. I have white hair and brown hair, which people comment on all the time. And I have a virtual background, which is a beautiful tree, one of the favorite trees in my neighborhood that I happen to capture at a perfect moment. So it's me, it helps me feel serene.
Elle, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Elle Johnson. I am a light-skinned Black woman with curly hair, also from Queens originally. I've got some dangling earrings on. I'm in a red room with white doors and some tchotchkes on the bookshelf behind me.
And finally, we have Pippa.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Pippa Bianco. Let me know if I'm going too fast. I am a white woman with long brown hair in a red dress with a navy mask on because I am in the car. Yeah, I'm in a car. Here it is. There's some other people that I'm going to leave off screen so that we're in private, but I'm so honored to be here with you. And yeah, it's great. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. I'm so excited to have you guys here. Let me just make sure that the view is correct. 1 second, guys. I want to make sure everyone can see all of the boxes. Okay, I think we should be good now. I think we should now be able to see everyone. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Thank you so much. So for our conversation today, we're breaking it up into 4 sections. We're going to start off with a Q&A where we explore the careers and experiences of these amazing women. And then we're going to dive into a a section that was coined by the moderator of our first D&I panel, Ian Field Stewart, which she titled The Indictment, which I absolutely love. But that's just focusing on the realities that we as women face in positions of power and positions of decision-making, specifically in this industry. And then we're going to end with some actionable steps where we highlight, both for ourselves and for our audience, what we can see is possible to sort of shift and change the conversation, both on the daily and then on a sort of larger scale. And then hopefully we'll have time at the very end for some audience questions. We only have an hour with these awesome women, so hopefully we have time for that, but we'll do our best. So first I want to start off by just providing some context for this conversation as to where we stand today. I just had a look at some stats. According to UCLA's 2020 Hollywood Diversity Report, we are seeing some great strides in terms of women directors over the past decade. We went from 4% of all directors in 2011 to a record high of 15% women directors in 2019. The percentage of women writers also grew over the past 10 years from 12% to 17%, 12.6 to 17.4 to be precise. And of course, we're having this conversation in the midst of history making. For the first time ever, 2 women have been nominated for Oscars in the directing category, with Chloe Zhao for Nomadland and Emerald Fennell for Promising Young Woman. So progress, she is coming slowly, but she is coming surely. So I just want to talk a little bit and start us off first about how we all got in the room, how we got to where we are, the people in this room. So this question is for each of you. What event do you consider is the moment that you sort of broke into the field that you currently find yourself in? And then on the second side of that, what got you to that place in the first place? What even got you to the position to be able to break in at all? Because our audience, again, is a lot of early career. So hearing, from you guys are so accomplished, hearing how you got to the positions you are in now is always so helpful. So whoever wants to kick us off, let's go.
I'll go first. I broke in, or the moment that I broke in was when I got a job as a script coordinator on a television show in New York City. So I'm a television writer, showrunner, EP now. But then I was just a young writer just wanting to get into the business, film or TV. And my break came when I was working in the box office at the Public Theater in New York. And I was, selling tickets there and also writing on the side, but also doing my due diligence and homework, watching a lot of television and reading up on writers and trying to follow writers that I respected and admired. And a writer came up to the box office to buy tickets. And I recognized his name from his credit card and, reeled off his credits and was like, oh, I know your work. You've done this and that. And this individual happened to be a little bit more paranoid than most. So under the guise of keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, he was kind of scared of why do I know so much information about him? He's just a writer. Most people don't know a lot of information about writers. So he invited me out to lunch and I brought my scripts with me and we talked about writing and what I wanted to do. I gave him my scripts. And then I would say about a month later, he got a job running a show and called me and said, would you be interested in being a script coordinator on my show? And I was like, I have no idea what a script coordinator is. I've never done that job. And he's like, so I'll make someone on the production teach you how to do that job and you'll be able to do it. And he did. He had the production manager actually show me what a script coordinator does and how to do it. And I started doing that job. And so from that point on, I was in a room with writers. I was working very closely with about 7 writers on that show. And that was my first entree into television. And I learned how to do that job. And I learned what writers do and how to work in a television show from that.
I love that. A stroke of fate for you is what got you in. Amazing. Who wants to hit up next? I
can go next. This is Peggy. I I broke in by working as a receptionist after moving to New York from Wisconsin, where I completed a master's degree, and I hid that fact when I was applying to type for people. But all the stuff I had done in film school paid off, and I was actually working as a producer director doing industrials within a year. And then a year or two after that, I actually met John Sayles and Maggie Renzi at a party. And John had made Secaucus 7, which for those who don't remember was a huge indie hit. And I really got to be, this was really when the indie film movement was getting built. And I got to get on the ground floor of that. We just liked each other, had fun at this party. And they asked me, they were going to be making a movie called Leanna, and asked me if I'd be a production manager. They never checked my experience. And to be honest, Leanna was the first movie I worked on, but I had acquired, you kind of as a producer type, you either have that personality or not, and I have it. And I had done lots of other production throughout school. Doing my industrials, you're doing all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I took it on and taught them about movie magic and scheduling. And then we just continued to work on together. And the moment I felt I'd really arrived was when I produced my first film, which was The Brother from Another Planet in 1983. And that's like, I was sitting on Ellis Island doing a night shoot, and I went, I have arrived.
Well, I love Peggy and Elle's stories. This is wonderful to hear. Also, congratulations, by the way, amazing. This is Pippa talking now. I think that's such an interesting question about when you broke in, because I do feel like for me, it was like a series of very tiny victories, none of which I think at the moment felt like, I've arrived, or like, I've made it. And even actually now, I still feel like it's a series of tiny victories and occasionally very large losses, but you accumulate the little crumbs and they build. So I think, my first job in film was in college. I was a PA in the camera department. So it was on Craigslist. I don't know if that's an option now if we do have lots of emerging filmmakers listening in. I feel like this was pre-Craigslist killer. So it was a little bit less threatening to look for jobs on Craigslist as a woman then, but it was a real film. It was a lovely little indie production. It was Vera Farmiga's directorial debut, which was called Higher Ground. And they needed like very low paid, kind of minimal, I guess it was more just manual labor. All I really did was coil and uncoil cable and move cones and stand in front of cones and tell people they couldn't walk through set. And that was my job. And I loved my job. And I was like, this is it. I've got to try to do this in whatever capacity I'll be allowed to for the rest of my life. And that was major. I think getting that little PA job off Craigslist really did alter the trajectory of my whole life. And the people that I met on that job, many of them ended up being people I worked with or continue to work with, actually. So I would say the next probably like real, maybe more of an actual breakthrough moment in the sense that I was transitioning from, manual labor crew, from being just on a film set in any capacity to being on a film set in a creative capacity, was making a short film. So I had then spent some time crewing and assisting, and basically just kind of like, swinging one vine to the next, like whatever I could, trying to leverage any job I did have to kind of inch me close, assisting another writer and a director at the time. And then I sort of realized that you isn't like, one of the downsides to film, and also some of the upside is that there isn't like a linear path. There's no guarantee you'll get promoted, but also, on the upside, there's so many ways to get where you want to go. So I, at that point, was like, I have to just make something. If I want to direct, then I think I just have to probably have something I can show people. So I made a short film, and I did it through the AFI directing workshop for women, which was a dream and a totally life-changing experience. I never would have left my job to essentially just hemorrhage money and crowdfund money from wherever else I could to make this short if I hadn't had the framework of that institution and that program. So yeah, and I made that short with one of the producers on Higher Ground, the woman who gave me my first job as a PA, produced that short with me. And then the star of that short was Thaisa Farmiga, who was Vera's little sister, who was that indie movie had been her acting debut. And we just become friends because we were, the most clueless people on set. So I think that was really like a culmination actually of that first experience, but making that short. And then I think being very fortunate with the short's reception was my breakthrough, I would say. That was so long. Sorry, guys, I'm muting myself again.
That was really great. This is Briana again. I feel like, just listening to you guys, the through line that I heard from all three of you is putting yourself in situations and in environments where you're able to connect with other people in the industry that you ultimately want to be in, and finding your sort of tethers to those places any way that you can, which is, I think, good advice for anyone looking to break into an industry. But I want to focus on your amazing talents for a second. I mean, like, you guys have accomplished so much between the three of you. I would like, when you answer this question, to kind of summarize. Hopefully people read your bios in the Zoom invite, but also just to add a little bit of context and choose, whichever accomplishment you want to pair with this question. But what uniquely do you feel that you bring to the table in your work? You guys have years of experience, and you've obviously are very dedicated to what it is that you do, and that's evident. But how would you describe, I guess, the sort of fundamental truths and philosophies around how you've come to hone your craft and reach the successes that you have, whether that's directing or show running or production or in the education space like Peggy? I would just love to hear about how you guys approach your crafts and your work.
I'll take a shot at that. Here's the thing. I've worked with some very, very good people, and you have to remember that I have over 30 years in the film business before I started working in academia, right? And I've worked, John Sayles, a legend, early film days. I grew up with the Coen brothers, the Jim Jarmushes. We were all kind of this New York indie circle, right? And the great thing of coming out of indie is there's a real entrepreneurial nature, and there's just a get it done kind of attitude. So I would say for anybody in any aspect of that film business, I think you really have to just know you're going to get it done. You'll figure it out somehow. And I've learned that confidence comes from trusting that. It doesn't mean you know everything. That's not what confidence is. Confidence is knowing you will figure it out. And that gave me the confidence to start a suicide hotline when I knew nothing about that, but that's a separate story. But I think, here are the things. I have always had this belief that we're all kind of like in service of something greater than ourselves. In each of us, it's kind of like a radio channel. Some things you get static on, some things you tune in, and that's your channel. And I think that's what we're all doing in some way, consciously or unconsciously, in the business, as creative people, as practical people. And the things that I did was I always tried to treat other people like I'd like to be treated. I was always I'm known as a straight shooter, very direct, transparent, and I always tried to build and negotiate things to be a win-win. I was lucky enough to work with a lot of great people like John, Jodie Foster, oh my God, Scott Frank, I could go on and on, who had, to me, their most telling quality was their integrity and authenticity. And Jodie was also a real role model in a lot of ways for me. It was a pleasure to partner with her, and I think I helped her on her first two films as a director. And I directed myself, and I think that helped tremendously as a producer to know what a director needs. But what I saw with Jodie is Jodie was great because she was one of the first women I saw not have to deal with like thinking she had to flirt to get what she wanted. She was just Jodie's immensely intelligent, right? Very straightforward. She is not, I think everyone that's worked with her would say the same thing. She grew up on sets. She really respects everyone on the crew. She's not elitist in any way. And very often people think that stars are going to be that way, and she wasn't. So all of those things were things that, in values, I guess, that I tried to carry forward in all the things that I did. I also think that I was always attracted to telling stories about outsiders, and that people who are not seen and always as valued as you would hope they would be. And when I directed my short film, Trevor, that won an Oscar, that was an opportunity, even though I'm not a 13-year-old gay boy, I did understand what it feels like to be an outsider. And I knew that even as a straight person, I could bring that to that story. And I think that people really responded to that, and it's part of what made it successful. But it also then led me to, I would never have gone, I'm starting the film business and one day I'll be the godmother of a suicide hotline. But the story of Trevor created that opportunity, and that led me to see there was a need among the kids that I knew might be watching that film for help, organized help. And when I realized that, I just couldn't look away. And so I brought my filmmaking chops and really had this brainchild to start a national suicide hotline. And now, 20 years later, it's the premier service in the world for helping LGBTQ youth, suicide prevention, crisis intervention. We lobby Washington around mental health legislation for gay youth. Offices in New York and Los Angeles. I mean, it's a big deal, and it's really, what's impressive is how effective it is, and hundreds of thousands of kids we're saving and helping, I think, each year. So then I took all that into academia, and the truth is, I go where I feel fed, sort of soul-wise, and at a certain point, I realized, and I am, dare I say, older than almost everyone here. And at a certain point, I was interested in giving back. And I got more enjoyment out of helping. I mean, I will eat, drink, like I love movies, man. I love the movies. I just was like, I didn't know how I was going to do it when I was growing up in this little town in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. But I just followed my instincts. And I moved to New York, was robbed within a week. All the stuff that I moved was gone. But it was just like, I knew I was in the right place. And I've never, ever regretted that. So now I get to bring that into academia and help the next generation of influencers and culture shapers to enter the world, I hope, with that same sense of integrity, understanding of the value of unique voice and perspective, and then the pragmatic knowledge about how to help move that out into the world and succeed.
I love that, Peggy. I mean, what you've done at this point, to this point, is really incredible. As you said, you've saved so many lives through the work that you're doing, and helping put people on the right path. In many senses of the word. So thank you for that work. Elle or Pippa, do you guys, one of you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I'll just say that in terms of how I kind of broke in and what I thought I was bringing to being a writer. I come from a law enforcement family. I felt really comfortable with those kind of stories and understanding those characters in that world. And so when I started writing, I really focused on and drew from the stories of my dad from being a parole officer in Manhattan for 30 years. And so I kind of targeted getting into cop shows and police procedurals, and any of the specs or kind of pilots that I wrote were about that world. And so by branding myself really specifically in that way, I was able to kind of break in and bring some authenticity and truth to those types of stories. I had a perspective that not a lot of people had, being a child of law enforcement. So I was able to kind of parlay that into my specialty in terms of a career. And when I would go on meetings, I would often talk about just my dad and my experiences as growing up with him. And that, again, made my experience valuable because it was so specific, and I had really specific stories to bring that I don't think other people were bringing. So in terms of breaking in and what I was able to bring, it really was just, writing what I knew and kind of staying true to that. And once I got in, being able to branch out and work on more character-driven shows and trying to do other things. But that was really kind of my way of getting my foot in the door.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting question. In terms of, I like the way you stated it, Elle, in terms of like, your way of getting your foot in the door, I think is an interesting, or is a helpful way for me to think about it. I think, well, I can tell you what quality I think I want to think I have, which is resilience, that I think, and adaptability and flexibility, that I think, without, again, like compromise. I think, as I work primarily as a director, but also a writer, and I guess part of your job is to not compromise. That's sort of why you're being hired. But also a lot of your job is, to make something real, which means taking a perfect idea and realizing it involves some compromise, in terms of making something real. So I do think that being, I think if I had to think about what I think has been my most useful kind of, or the thing I want to hone and cultivate and protect in myself, it is, I think, resilience and adaptability, because so many things, I think almost nothing actually, by the time it's born in whatever iteration it is, a script or film, is all that similar to the germ it started with. So I think, the difference between being someone who wanted to make films for me to being someone who makes films was saying like, okay, how can I look at the opportunities I have in front of me or don't have in front of me yet, the ones I'm looking for, and then parlay, the things I want. How can I chart hop from rock to rock, and adapt and be fluid, I guess. And then, but, while still kind of steering myself to a singular point where I want to go. So I think that's probably, and I think that's something I think would be, in terms of like career longevity, that being able to tolerate disappointment, rejection, frustration, failure, anger, people not being happy with you, people being frustrated with you. I think that so much, when I look at my peers, I think that people who are really thriving, a lot of it has to do with how much tolerance do you have for those things, and how much energy do you put into keeping centered and, and sort of not getting destroyed by all the sort of, I think I'm making it sound really negative. It's not really negative, but I think life is hard, so I think, being resilient and not necessarily needing, or just being able to kind of surf, I think is, a quality that has been very, very helpful to me, and I imagine will continue to be very helpful.
But I just have to say, it's not negative, it's grounded. It's vision meets pragmatism. That's what I hear.
Thank you.
I do think, Pippa, you touched on what I think is challenging a lot of times about being in a position of power and decision making, is that everyone's going to be happy with the decisions that you make. But that's just the name of the game. And why you've been hired for this position is because whoever's done that trusts your vision enough to make sure that you sort of stay on that path and make sure that you bring to fruition what you set out to do. But it does, you do have to have a bit of resilience in that respect, especially, women are taught to be the ones who make people happy, to please, to, people please, all of that. And so, I do think that there's a lot of fighting against sort of the traditional roles that women have been placed into in the positions that we're in. So we've reached the indictment part of the Q&A panel. I'm loving it. But I want to again shed light on just the day-to-day realities of working in this industry, working in any industry, but specifically to you guys' experience. So I want to start with each of you sort of laying out how often throughout your career would you say that you've been the only woman in the room?
I can answer that. This is Elle. I have very often been the only woman in the room and the only person of color. There have been notable exceptions to that. I worked on a show called Any Day Now, which was predominantly women of color. I think we had 2 men and like 5 or 6 women. And then I worked on another show called Saving Grace, which had all female writers and 1 male writer. And I will say that both of those shows were created by a woman named Nancy Miller, who had a specific agenda of hiring diversity, and this was early on, way before that was popular, but frequently in the kind of cop procedural space that I was working in, I was often the only woman and the only person of color. And I will say that a lot of times that was the only reason that I was hired. People back when I started 20 years ago felt free to say, hey, we're looking for a woman or a Black person to be on this show. We have a character who is a woman or a person of color. So we feel like we need to have a writer who can service that. And frequently they would, you'd be the only hire. They'd never hire more than 1 of us. So you're competing against your friends and peers for the same spot. That has definitely started to change over time, but that was frequently the position that I was in. And I really felt like I had to be, I felt like I had to be a steward of the stories for women and people of color. You really want to try and push to get those stories told, because you realize that nobody else is going to tell them. So you have to kind of push for it.
Well, I think that, it was interesting, when I started out, crews were still predominantly male. I mean, it's kind of funny for me to think about it now. It really was boys' town. And I have been the only woman in the room in some instances. Particularly, I remember a meeting with Teamsters in New Jersey, where, they sat with a window behind them, so you were blinded and couldn't see their faces, and trying to make sure they didn't damage our trucks and the brother when we were shooting in Hoboken. But I learned to negotiate, and that was a life moment. Tony Soprano and me. But here was the great thing, as a producer, honest to God, all you need is a property, a phone, and a business card, and you're set to go. And because I was a producer, first of all, I encourage where people can to have a partner. It's a long road. I mean, producers are the people who are on the movie for the lifespan of a project, which just to get a film made is usually still around a year. To get it off the ground fast equals 3 years. And then when you think about IP, you control the rights for infinity, right? So you're the one, filing the, tax returns and the blah, 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 and the distributions and the this and that. But what the gift of being a producer early on in that period is I was so proud. This was one of my great props in life is I got to bring a lot of women into business. I really made it a priority to hire women. And there are great folks out there like Sarah Green, Georgia Kacandes, who's, done the Marty movies and et cetera, who cut their teeth, on the projects we did. I tried to also always hire people of color. I mean, I called Spike, we called the Hudlin brothers, we called everybody on the planet at that time, which was so difficult. I mean, the unions, the non-unions, there was like one black grip in all of New York. I mean, we're really talking, this was rough. So the pleasure has been to see in my lifetime how common it is now to see fathers bring their kids to set for lunch and hang with them, not just women. And it's just a whole different vibe. And it reflects more like what the world looks like. So that's been one of the great things. As a director, I will tell you one of the most uncomfortable moments I had was when I was actually observing on a show, and I was sitting in on a casting session, and I was the only woman in the room, and someone came in to read for an elderly, like probably a woman around 70 for a part. And the men in the room started making fun of the idea about how they'd write a scene for her to have to kiss the guy who is the lead, who is in his 30s, and how gross that would be. you know, it makes them do it. I have never felt more invisible in my whole life than in that moment. And you know, when people talk about feeling harassed, it's very hard to convey this, but that thing, like, it made me sick to my stomach. It was like I had been, I'll simply say that I have never felt so, just that uncomfortable, not seen, so disrespected. I mean, not even thought to be considered. I was like nothing. I was invisible. So when other people talk about that, and I'm talking when I did this, I was in a directing for TV program. This was when I was in my 40s. I mean, I was a grown up, right? And that happened to me then. So I was like, wow. But that's what I worked against and continue to work against, is so that there is more parity. I always work to help beef up the strength. And I really have worked with not only people I've mentored, but particularly the emerging generation, to understand you're empowered. It's a sexist, racist, ageist, blah, blah, blah industry, but that does not mean you don't have power. And that's the thing about each person having to navigate, because we've been victimized, but we're not victims. And that's a really tricky thing to navigate, but that's what I believe in. And we all have the power to help that be easier for the next ones coming along.
I love that. I feel like I'm going to hold that. We've been victimized, but we're not victims. You know, I think that that's such a powerful notion to carry through these experiences, because that's horrible. I'm so sorry to hear that happened. Yeah, but you know, sorry, did you say something, Peggy? Okay.
I just say my experience, like, that's minor. Like,
Yeah.
that thing, like, that made me feel like that. Believe me, people have had way, way, way worse.
Yeah. Pippa, do you want to speak on some times that how many times you've been the only woman in a room?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to say thank you both, and all of you, but thank you for for being soldiers. I really do feel like it's every woman, every person of color, every queer person, you make so much room for the people to come behind you. And I think I, was so fortunate in so many ways. When I think about, if I'd been like trying to do what I was doing even 5 years earlier, it would have been a really different landscape. So I think it's in so many ways things change so slowly, but in so many ways certain things really change quite quickly. And I do feel like I've been fortunate in that I have not been on a set where I was the only woman. That's just a thing I haven't seen. In terms of, I think the representation for people of color is, and also I think, sort of economic diversity or classism, I think is a real thing. I think that is where I see that we have made the least amount of progress since I've been working, in terms of I don't feel that is, that there are as many opportunities or as much energy being put there as there are into, let's just say, women as a catch-all, or particularly like cis or femme women. But I think, yeah, I mean, I was really, really lucky that first Craigslist post was a woman director. I think that changed everything for me. I was really, really fortunate that it was a woman director, and she was 6 months pregnant and starring in the film and producing the film and had her 2-year-old on set. So that like unlocked a whole world of possibilities for me, where I was like, oh, well, if she could do it 6 months pregnant with a kid and be producing and starring, like, I'm never going to be an actor, and I don't think I'm going to be pregnant anytime soon. So like, if she could do it, I could probably do it. It's going to be a lot less hard for me. So I think I've been really fortunate in that. I think I got really, really lucky by pure chance that I got to see women doing the job. That doesn't mean, like, I would say even on that film, we weren't in the majority. On my own sets, I've been very fortunate that like I could make it majority female. And also I do think that's where it does really come down to directors and producers to just refuse to say, because Peggy, that line you've heard too, or I've heard that from unions being like, well, we don't, the union, like when I was shooting in Canada, they were like, for the costume union, I was like, I need to see an equal, like you need to at least show me 50-50 women and men and 50-50, people of color and white people, if that's what you're saying. And they were like, oh, we don't have anybody. Sorry guys. We don't have any people in your, in your bracket who are non-white. sorry. And then thankfully, like my producers, we were all able to appeal and just say like, well, then we don't want to hire within the union. Then we're going to hire someone and you're going to have to let them into the union, because that's not actually like, that's a ridiculous thing to say. And that is how it went. That is how it went. We were able to hire the person we wanted to. She wasn't in the union. She was a woman of color. And then she got into the union because of our job. So I do think that a lot of like, you know, we have, you know, even in small sets that like on every stage, you have a lot more, you can object, you know, you don't, just because people tell you this is the way it is, or there isn't anyone, we can't find anyone. I had a casting director once tell me there were only 2 Indian actresses in all of the US. And I was like, well, that's not how math works. I was like, that's so interesting. Where are they then? That's so weird. I don't, that's mystifying to me that there's only 2. So I think it's like, you don't have to accept like people, I think, are really lazy. And it's much easier to just continue to hire the people you know. And most of the people who are working are white and male and wealthy. And so they know other people who are white and male and wealthy. And it's much easier to just keep dipping into that same pool than it is to do the work required to find the people who are there, because everybody's there. It's not like, you know, there's plenty of people, really, really talented people of every facet of identity description waiting to work. So yeah, in terms of my personal experience, I've been very fortunate that I have not been the only woman. In terms of like gnarly shit I've witnessed as the only, you know, as like, I've certainly been in rooms where I was the only woman, like with a bunch of male producers saying like unconscionably heinous shit, you know, about, especially because my first film was, sorry guys, I'm still in a car, but because my first film dealt with sexual assault in some capacity, I think it was an eye opener to me that so many people were not on the same page about what my film was. And a producer who we ended up not taking off of the film, but who the financier had really brought on and really wanted us to work with was, he had a completely different vision of my film that was like haunting to me. Like we were in a conversation and, you know, he was like, you know, what I love about your film is that she's so weak, you know, like she's so vulnerable. It was this like this insane narrative he'd created of what film we were making. And I think it was really important for me because I was like, okay, great. I need to make my script bulletproof. You know, like if this guy can project that onto this material, then yes, there's more work I need to do as a writer to close off these avenues of interpretation to as much as you can. You can't control how people interpret things to a large part, but you can do a lot of work to make a very clear script. And then also it's incumbent upon me to just say, I don't want to work with that person. And I felt in crisis about it because he was very powerful. And he was a lot of what made our movie like hot, you know, because I was a first time director and it wasn't, you know, but I was like, I'm not going to be able to sleep at night. And also I'm going to go insane, you know, like I'm so miserable and I feel so crazy talking to him that I think I just have to make a really hard choice here and decide that, you know, even if this is shooting myself in the foot in some way, working with him is shooting myself in the head. So I can't do it. And yeah, so I think there's certainly like no shortage of experiences of like, you know, I'm sure of people being horrible, but I think there also were a lot of people who in that moment stood by me in the project and were like, oh yeah, well then let's just get rid of him and we'll just keep making the film, which was wonderful. So that was long and meandering and a little bit distracted. But yeah, hopefully that's a suitable answer for the indictment portion of the Q&A.
No, that was really amazing. And actually what you just hinted on, what you just hit on is a huge question that I have for you guys as well. Like, you know, we're talking about equity, we're talking about parity for women, but we're talking about it very specifically in the business structure. At the end of the day, this is how you guys pay your bills. You know, Pippa, you spoke about feeling fear and trepidation for standing up about what your film was about, you know, in the face of this producer who had a heinous interpretation of what your film really was centered on. And I just want to bring attention to that fact that, you know, we're talking about how we pay our rent, how we pay our bills, how we feed our families. And how do you go about weighing the sort of pros and cons? Pippa, you spoke about it a little bit. But, for Peggy and Elle, how do you guys go about weighing those realities and those fears when it comes to potentially speaking up or calling out or advocating for yourself or other women, other people of color in your spaces?
Well, I feel like, as I touched on a little bit, I feel like particularly when I've been hired, and I know that I've been hired because I'm Black and a woman, I feel that I am then empowered to stand up for the stories that I want to tell, that I'm there to voice concerns, and that I'm there to kind of broaden the palette of stories that are going to be told. So I've always felt it was important when you go into any situation to know what your job is and to do that job impeccably so that no one can call you out and say that you're not doing the job, in other words. So I think, I don't know, I guess I've always just been very comfortable saying no to things that I didn't think had integrity or that I didn't want to do. But while also offering up an alternative, a solution, particularly when you're a writer and you're telling stories, you want to be able to say, look, that story I feel like isn't servicing these diverse or female characters, but here's an alternative. Like, here's what I think would be more realistic, and always trying to push that in a respectful way, because I think that that's also part of it. Even if you don't respect someone that you are working with, you must be respectful, because that's what you want in return. So I just feel like, as a writer, I'm the keeper of the story. I am the one who's responsible for maintaining the integrity of my script, certainly. And so always just keeping that front of mind, because that reputation will follow you. And I think once you've established that you're a person who's going to speak up, that you're not going to back down, it only makes it easier for you to continue to do that, because people know what they're getting into. And if anyone ever questions you, you throw it back on them, and it's like, well, why did you hire me if you didn't want me to speak up? Did you just want me? I don't take dictation. Like, I'm a writer. That's not my job, is not to just transcribe what you're saying. It's to infuse it with something from myself. So I feel like I've always wanted to empower myself in that way, and just suck it up and take that hard step of speaking up, because the first time you do it, it might be hard, but it gets easier and easier. And then that's what people expect from you.
Absolutely. I think there's what you guys are doing affects perception of entire groups of people. That's what I've really come to realize the longer I spend in this industry of storytelling. Like, what you're doing affects what people think of when they imagine a lawyer, when they imagine a president, when they imagine, someone in a position of real influence. The stories that we're telling and that you guys are advocating for, it affects how those people are perceived, what that vision looks like. And it's really heartening to hear that you're sticking to your guns in those spaces, because it just makes me really excited to see what's next. You know what I mean? Peggy, did you have anything you wanted to add in there?
Well, it's sort of funny you asked this at this point in my life. I agree with Elle, and I will say, I worked freelance, most of my life. So I have, the great thing about that is, there's survive and then there's thrive. And I've been lucky enough to feel like I actually have made it to a point in my life where I do feel like I'm thriving on many levels. The soul level, sort of more financially, et cetera, But it is interesting. You get hired for your qualities and people say they want it. And then when it shows up, they don't always. And, I recently have been dean for almost 3 years at the School of Film and Television at Loyola, and was recently asked to step down. And, there's that funny thing about, culture and what people say they want, which is very often people say they want change. And when change shows up, it's not actually where they want to stand. And so that can be a challenge. But I'm immensely proud of what I got to do while I was there. You know, I grew programs, grew the profile, it got its highest ranking ever. I got cash grants, partnership with people like God bless Steve Moscow at Village Roadshow, who we set up a wonderful production fund with. And, you know, improved the student experience and expanded possibilities for them. So I'm very, very proud of that. So those are the things. I mean, I've always been kind of a pioneer and a pathfinder, and that works for some people and doesn't for others. So there you go. But I kind of, as I say, it helps to have lived as long as I have. And, you know, you get to a certain place in life and you're pretty clear on who you are. And that's what you take moving forward. And for me, that's been the gift of age and a lot of inner work. And for all those folks who are watching, who are about to who are looking to step into the industry, all I can say is really and truly the best guide I had wonderful friends, I had great mentors, but truly the thing that guided me most was that inner voice and inner listening. You know, you can write out the list, the pros, the cons, the this and that, but it's really, that's the thing I urge students and others to practice, is getting that quiet time and listening, like Pippa beautifully modeled. Like, this is a risk, but does not sit right if I don't take that risk and stand up for what I think is right with, you know, tactfully, appropriately. But it's that thing, that's what you will be constantly tested on throughout your career. People will always be pushing against that wall of, what do you think is right and what's for the best? And each person has to be the one that decides for themselves what's acceptable.
Absolutely. I am so inspired talking to you ladies, and I'm going to find some silent time later today to reflect on myself and where I want to be grounded. So we're coming up on time. I want to get one question in from you guys in terms of sort of looking forward and where we can and potentially, you know, draw attention to some places where things are lacking, and we know them well. But I want to focus specifically on sort of, you know, checks and balances. I think, you know, hearing from Pippa and her saying, I've been really lucky to not have been on sets where there weren't other women, I think speaks to where, you know, where we're going and how far we've come. But in terms of sort of checks and balances and making sure that continues, what is still missing from you guys' perspective? What can we be asking for? What can we be pushing for? Because I think we're stronger. I know we're stronger in numbers. I mean, just looking at the Times Out movement, what women have been able to do in the industry in just these last couple of years by banding together. So I kind of want to bring attention to something that we could potentially all throw our sort of weight behind in order to get that conversation either started or moved further down the line.
That's interesting. That's a tough one and a good one, because I feel like we are in a very different space now. And what's wonderful about the period that we're in now is that we are able to have open discussions, where I think, you know, years prior, it would be uncomfortable to bring these things up, and maybe that would shut people up. But now we know it's going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. You know, these are uncomfortable conversations for some people to have. So I feel like the thing to do now is to just keep pushing, you know, to speak up, to also recognize, I feel like I've noticed a phenomenon that is challenging, which is the good ones. You know, we all work with people who are well-intentioned and well-meaning, and these are the good ones, but even so, there's still blind spots. Even so, you still have to say, hey, wait a minute, I know you think you're an ally, but what you're doing is not helping, and you need to hear this. And people will get defensive and push back against you, but you have to stand up and really say, look, I know this is uncomfortable. I know you maybe don't see this, you maybe don't want to hear it, but I'm telling you, because you're gonna get dragged if you keep acting this way. So I'm kind of telling you, for your own good, you need to hire more women, look at more people of color, broaden your perspective. And so I think that even though we're in a period where things are out in the open, we have to feel comfortable and not let up on pushing it, and not, wait for somebody else to bring up those issues or be like, they should know this by now. They don't know it. And we have to keep pushing for it.
Boy, howdy.
Yeah, I think I love what, oh, sorry.
No, go Pippa.
Okay, sorry, I can't tell. My connection is so bad. I'm like, am I just yelling over people? No, Elle, I just want to say I love what you said. And I feel like you've said it so elegantly and thoughtfully. And also, I think something you said earlier really pinged like something a therapist said to me once, which was like, you don't have, like, just say no. You don't have to get upset, just say no. I feel like so much of, like, right now I'm working on a show where I'm dealing, what well, I won't give any more. Actually, I'm going to stop giving details, but it's like we're in a position where we have to give notes on things that we think are problematic in many ways, but certainly along the lines of race and gender. And I notice every time I say that, like, this is a problem, people get really defensive. I'm annoying. I'm a nag. I'm a killjoy. But if I say this is cliche, this joke isn't funny, you're going to get dragged. This is, like, boring. I'm bored. All of a sudden, people really want to fix it. So that's really sad. I think it's really unfortunate. But sometimes I've found I've had more success getting through to people if I use those words, because all of a sudden when it becomes, if I'm saying it's a problem, then I'm the problem. But if I'm saying you're boring, this is a cliche, this joke isn't funny, no one's gonna laugh. If I say it's a stereotype, they're very defensive. If I say it's a cliche joke, all of a sudden we have to change the joke immediately. So I think part of it, that's, I guess, a separate topic, but in terms of, like, for anybody who's questioning how to have those conversations at the workplace, I feel like humor is often really helpful to me in terms of being heard, and also putting it in terms of, like, for some reason people just don't think being an ethical person is part of their job, and that if you bring ethics into it, you're being annoying or you're being moralistic, and you're somehow a problem. But
PC
if you just
is the favorite thing
terms,
they say. That's when they
yes,
call
the
you
PC
you're
police.
being too PC.
Yeah. So, but if you put it in terms of what they do think is their job, being entertaining, being original, being unique, then all of a sudden they have time to care about it. Or finding the best talent. That goes for hiring as well. Every time I said, like, I want to see, like, hiring parity, I want to see a list that has, don't send me a list with all men, don't send me a list with all white people. Then I'm being annoying. But if I say, like, oh my God, you're missing these huge talent pools, we don't want to miss out on talent, all of a sudden people have time to look. So I think it's like, if as much as you can reframe it as this is your job, this is literally your job, and it will make all parts of your job better. It'll make it more entertaining. It'll make it cooler. It'll make it fresher, whatever. Then people have time for it. That's a total sidestep. In terms of things I think we need for the industry for, to get things to the next level, I think health insurance. I don't know how people feel in our, but I think so much of being able to break in is being able to tolerate being broke for a really long time. And I think we could do a lot to enable, female storytellers, and also, people of color, more diverse storytellers, period, if people weren't struggling for basic kind of medical and, like, security needs. So I think working with the union to, one, make the benefits better for women, because we still don't have, like, I'm fortunate enough to finally be in the union now, but it still doesn't have a lot. There's no fertility benefits. There's no paid parental leave. There's a lot of things that make it really tough to be a woman. But I think if we could do more to figure out ways to get, to, like, let's say, have a freelancers union for people who are so early career, they won't be able to get into the Writers Guild or the Directors Guild, or other ways in which we could make people's lives more secure, so that they can continue to try to be creative, I think would be huge. So, yeah. And also one tiny thing, I put it in the chat because I saw someone say, what was the program I mentioned? And I, like an idiot, just typed it to the other panelists. I can send it to Briana to forward later maybe, but it's the AFI Directing Workshop for Women, DWW. But also you should know about Project Involve, which is Film Independence, sort of like a little mini lab thing. It's like the DWW workshop, but not just for women, for people of color or for queer people, queer filmmakers specifically. The San Francisco Film Society has an incredible lab and residency. That's SFFS. And also every major film festival that you love is going to have one as well. So the Cannes residency for the European and international filmmakers is amazing, but also American filmmakers can apply. The Berlinale Talent Campus. And those are the main ones I'm thinking of now, but Tribeca also has a lot of good initiatives, and of course Sundance. But in terms of working your way up to those, I think AFI and Project Involve are incredible. Okay, sorry, I'm muting myself.
God bless Pippa. Second. You know, the truth is I was on the Film Independent board for about a decade, back when it was called IFP. But that organization is incredible. And also I partnered with them to set up our first screenwriter residency program, you know, so, and I was very invested in, somebody in the Q&A thing was asking about film schools. Is it worth going to film school? Again, that's an individual choice. What I would say, though, when you do go to one, and it's good, you create a bond and a network for life. And when you're in a really good film school, you have people from all over the world that are working there. It is astounding. And you work on each other's films. I just look at, when we're looking at who was nominated for Academy Awards this year, Chloe Zhao, right? NYU, Molly Asher, her producer out of NYU, Joshua James Richard up for DP, right? Also out of NYU, that whole posse out of NYU. And you can go on and on and on. And that's where you realize it's, generally speaking, I know everybody thinks they need to go meet the head of every studio, but it's really your peers that you will rise with. So really the people to get to know are the agent's assistants more than the agents. Like those are the folks that you need to network with to help start to build things forward. You know, I do think, you know, I like go look at Emma Goldman and the rest. I go, how do you make change? You organize. You know, Effie Brown and Rebecca Green are doing amazing stuff to actually start a producers union. It's been shot down. Hollywood tried it a million years ago. It never really happened. And I know people still have these cliched ideas about producers being fat cats, smoking cigars, and, you know, just pencil pointing on numbers. The truth is, you know, successful producers are some of the most creative people in the business. They're the ones that have that resilience and determination. They live with it the longest, and they're the ones that generally are responsible for bringing a package together. And if they're smart, they hire people like Pippa and Elle to work on their shows. But you know, all the stuff like Pippa was talking about, agencies, the only reason things have started to change, listen, I was doing all this lobbying 25 years ago I was going to the DGA, we met with studios, like hire more women, hire more women. You know, nothing happened. What happened is finally, and this is why I'm excited. I'm so excited for women now. Oh my God. I see real change. It's not where it needs to be yet, but finally the needle is moving, and it didn't for decades. So this is really an exciting opportunity. And the same will be true for people of color, right? I think, again, I could rattle off a list of the most amazing people that I know coming out of film school, Black, Asian, white, everything in between, that are extraordinary filmmakers. And they're the ones that are going to make this normalize what's going on. So I say support that. I say stand up for your rights. Pippa just gave you the best advice ever. Nobody likes righteousness. It's off-putting, it's othering, right? When you try to call to, this will make you money, and find any way you can, because I keep going, we work in a commercial field, and that's entertainment. And entertainment is great. It is powerful. It can be funny. It can move you to tears. Its gift is it inspires. So use that power wisely. and then keep hearing stuff like what everyone here has shared about how to stand for your truth, but don't do it obnoxiously. And push the best you can.
And also, I love what Peggy said, but also if you need to be obnoxious and you're upset, it's okay too. I think Peggy would also say that it's not, don't give yourself a hard time about
yes,
being
I
perfect.
believe I would have qualified as that for several people. Oh. Thank you, Pippa.
That was amazing. Thank you guys so much. I think we all have a lot to ruminate on, to take forth in our day-to-day. I think I know I for one feel really inspired, and just looking at the comments, it seems like a lot of the folks here feel the same. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to audience questions, but looking at them, honestly, between all three of you ladies, you answered a lot of them, from how to get started to how to keep going to how to move into space, how to move, in this business. So hopefully you guys feel like you got your time's worth sitting with these ladies, because I know I did. Thank you so much. Please keep an eye out for more of these conversations. Like I said, we're going to be having them on an ongoing basis around, diversity and inclusion across all these different groups. Elle, Peggy, Pippa, you guys are incredible. Thank you so much. We're super blessed to have you guys here with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. This was wonderful.
I just have to say, I heart all of you, including Jaren.
Yes, Jaren, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was really, really nice for me. I wasn't expecting it. And yeah, everyone was so, Elle, Peggy, I was really inspired, but yeah, I'm feeling really good right now. So thank you for letting me listen. But
amazing. Well, take care, everyone. We'll be seeing you and your work soon, I'm sure. Thank you.
Bless you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.